So we've gone from the wonderful, amazing Roger Bannister and Eliud Kipchoge to the dirtiest race in history.
Hello and welcome to this bonus episode as I chat history of running with writer and runner Duncan Larkin. He joins me as we discuss whether humans are natural long-distance runners, the ancient Olympics, Pheidippides and the Battle of Marathon, the runners of South and Central America all the way through to the First World War runners, the 4-minute mile, the 2-hour marathon, and finally the dirtiest race in history. Coming up on Saturday, I have a conversation, following on from last Saturday's episode about the past and future of the British Army, with General David Petraeus and Lord Andrew Roberts talking about the conflicts post-Second World War. General Petraeus is the former commander of US forces in Iraq and Afghanistan and was the director of the CIA. Please do rate and review and tell your friends if you can. I'd be hugely grateful. Until then, listen to myself and Duncan Larkin chatting running. Duncan Larkin, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you on. We're going to be talking about running because you are the author of Run Simple and the 30-Minute Runner, and it's history of running today.
That's right, Ollie. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm honored. I love your podcast.
Oh, you're so kind. And listeners, Duncan got hold of me and said that he'd like to talk about the history of running, and I love running, so I also could think of a few historical examples, I think, of running that would be interesting for us to talk about. And luckily, in Duncan, we have the man to do it. Right, Duncan, let's get cracking. Running. Now, I had mentioned to you when we were talking about setting this up, one area that's of interest, I think, in the history of running is, are we natural long-distance runners? There is a theory, isn't there, that perhaps we are?
Yes, and the short answer to that I believe is yes. I think everybody, there's a great book by Chris McDougall called Born to Run. If you haven't read it, read it. It's great. It makes you think differently about runners. A lot of times when I coach a lot of runners, I hear people say, well, I'm not a runner. And I'm always like, you're a runner. I think, I'm not an evolutionary scientist. I don't have that background, but Chris McDougall's book really convinced me that back to the hunter-gatherers, I think that as a species, we've evolved to run. And in our modern day and age, with the sedentary lifestyle and our internet and our phones, we've kind of gotten away from, our roots. So the answer is yes. I think we're all born to run.
Do you know what I loved about that book, apart from the fascinating story of that tribe in Mexico that are the natural runners?
Yeah, the Tarahumara.
Right, that's it. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about them, actually, because they have this kind of natural ability, but we don't see them in any of their runners entering in sort of the marathon at the Olympics or anything, do we?
You don't. Fascinating, a group of Native Americans. Theirs is, and just like, we'll talk about the Incans and the Chasqui, but just theirs is a necessity, nomadic peoples. Ironically, there are some really good Tarahumaran ultra runners. So they are a long and slow is the way to go type of runners. Northern Mexico, Chris McDougall kind of embedded himself, who wrote Born to Run, with them and really got them into the forefront. Fascinating group of people.
And the other thing I liked about that book was that he recommended you don't need to spend fortunes on footwear, which is a philosophy that I have always followed.
I could talk for an hour, and I know on minimalism, he did. I have one critique of the book. So I wrote a book called Run Simple, which is not take off your shoes and go barefoot running. Chris McDougall is a big, the Born to Run is a big, there's a type of shoe called Five Fingers. I don't know if people have seen them, but some people might have them, but they're like these coverings for your feet, and each little rubber sole thing has a place for your toe. That was huge coming out of that book, that movement. I don't recommend that. I think you need, I do like the fact that you don't need a lot to go running, but I'm a big proponent of shoes and getting the right shoe. You don't need to spend a lot of money for it, but we aren't the Tarahumara. I'll speak for myself. I'm middle-aged, adding all that weight on. And when I go running, my body is not built to just, slap on these 5 fingers and do the minimalist thing. So I really recommend people go to a shoe store, talk to an expert, and have their feet analyzed and their stride analyzed, and then get put into the right shoe. But you don't need to throw money at this, though, and that's the part I like about his book, and kind of where I went with my book is, unplug, take the electronics out, just go out running without all your data and your smart watches and your $1 million gadgetries, because that's really goes against what I think the real spirit of running is.
I completely agree. I don't listen to music when I go running because I almost go into a meditative state.
Definitely. It's such a great, it's a trance for me. Sometimes, when I was training, I used to be a competitive marathoner. When I was, I had 100 or so miles a week, I would go on these runs and I would just get lost. Like I wouldn't know where I would lose track of the miles. I'd just be so in a meditative state. And if you've never done that, people that are listening have never done that before, just try, go for a run. Don't bring your smartphone, for safety, but don't listen to music. Don't listen to this podcast.
Hang on, Duncan. Let's not go too crazy.
Sorry.
But that does kind of speak to the kind of running that our ancestors would have done because I think the theory is to sort of outpace your prey, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's outpace your prey. You're out on the Serengeti, right? You gotta survive. So it's that you got it, the fittest and the fastest, and you gotta go and hunt. It's the back to the hunting. It was a survival-based necessity for our ancestors.
And another part of history that I was interested in, because, the Olympic Games, which go back to antiquity, of course, in the Peloponnese in Greece. But even before that, there's these games in Ireland that are probably not familiar to many listeners. And the Greeks will obviously argue that theirs is the preeminent contest. And I'm sure let's face it probably are the Olympics, but these Celtian Games.
Yeah, but older than when you think of running, you think of literally the Olympics. We don't call them the Celtians, but we should maybe, because they predate the Greek Olympics. So I think 1600 BC is in Ireland, and it was a ritual. Just the Greeks, the Greek, it was all about festivals and rituals, and it was a ritual for these Celtian Games where they would honor the dead, funerary rites, and as part of that, there would be events. And I don't know that we know too much about them in terms of did they run a marathon? Did they run? I feel like we know more about the Greek Olympics in terms of what was done in the famous athletes, but one thing I was aware of with the Celtian Games is they brought them back, I think, in the 20s, and they were really popular. Yeah, it's something that I think, we need to put back into people's minds around history, because it's they're the OG Olympics.
The OG Olympics, yeah, absolutely. Well, the Olympics themselves, which the preeminent contest in the Olympics was really having teams of horses. That's famous figures from the ancient world, including Nero and Alcibiades. But the running side of the Olympics, I don't know much about that, actually.
That goes back to the word stadium. So they had stadia, which was a length that was run. And it goes back to, I think a lot of it is military, so you go from I need to hunt to I need to win wars. So we have tribes, and then we win wars. So a lot of the running activities, especially in ancient Greece and in other cultures, were tied to the concept of, being fit for battle. And I know that we'll probably get into Pheidippides and all that, but, there's the concept of, I know that the Greeks competed in some events where they would wear armor, 50 pounds of armor, and run in it. And the longest race held in the ancient Greek Olympics, it was around 5K, and it was multiple stadia. So multiple, kind of like running the ovals on the track. And that's where we get that concept today of the modern track.
Yeah, well, 5K, which is, of course, the length for park run. Do you have park run in America?
Park
run.
Park run doesn't sound familiar. We have
park run is this sort of, I would call it a phenomena, actually, that has swept not just this country. It's gone outside of Britain, and you see a park run all over the world. It's taking advantage of a local park and then setting up. It's volunteer led, and it's a 5K run, and everyone can do it. All comers are encouraged. You go to a website, you print off a label. Yeah. And that gives you your own specific barcode, and then you run your 5K, and at the end they just the volunteer will scan your number, and then you get your time back after the race. And it's always on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And it's this huge thing that started off, I think somewhere, I'm going to get this wrong, somewhere in London, but it's now all over the country and has expanded out into Europe and Australia and New Zealand.
I have not heard of it. I love the concept. It sounds like minimalist 5K runs, and laid back is the way to go. There are races out there where you can be competitive, but it sounds very, collegial and fun, and an event for people to just get out and exercise together.
Right. So you mentioned Pheidippides. Let's talk Pheidippides.
I think if you go up to anybody, you sit next to somebody on a plane, and like, oh, I'm a marathoner, I write running books. A lot of people will bring up Pheidippides, they'll bring up the marathon. So, he's the famous messenger, the hemerodrome, a day runner, which is what they had, these messengers in ancient Greece. 40 years old, believe it or not, if you believe Herodotus. So the Herodotus was the first source for this, but the Battle of Marathon, Greeks versus Persians, Athenians versus Persians, excuse me. Pheidippides, there's all these different accounts. So it's this legend and this lore that comes with them. There's a myth and an ethos. If you go with Herodotus basically is like, he went to Sparta 2 days, I think, before the battle. He ran like 150 miles. And there's a modern day Spartathlon, which is, that is the distance that people run. That's a crazy distance from marathon to Sparta, and he asked the Spartans for help. He asked for reinforcements, and the Spartans, I think it wasn't a full moon, and they were like, no, we can't do this, sorry, and he ran back. I think that's Herodotus, and then it kind of there's the myth, and things kind of go from there to a Syrian satirist named Lucian who basically wrote the whole narrative of the battle part. So after the battle, he sees a Persian ship that's heading towards Athens. The Athenians have won, and he runs back to Athens, which is the 25 miles, and says, quote unquote, we win, or hail, we are the winners, and then he dies. So that's kind of the weavings of the story. And then obviously everybody knows, the marathon became the event, in 1896, the first modern Olympics was the marathon, and it was from Marathon to Athens. And then it moved to, and the 1908 Olympics, it was when it was a set distance of 25 miles. And then it became the 26.2 distance in the 1908 Olympics in London, where they added some distance to run. I think it was from Windsor to the finish line, and they had to run an extra lap around the royal box. So that's where the 26.2 comes from. So
is the British royal family to thank for that additional, if you're cursing that final mile.
I wasn't going to go there. Yeah. I mean, when you get to that final, this, especially the 0.2, right? Because a lot of marathons, I've run a lot of marathons where you hit that, you see the 26-mile mark, and then you're like, can I be done here? And then there's that 0.2, and you're like, okay, yeah. If you know your history, you can curse the royals, but.
Well, I think that's, the royals may be criticized for many things, and that's probably the least of them.
Definitely.
Well, you are actually speaking to someone who's done the Athens Marathon, and you do start. Well, it was fantastic. I did it first in 2009, and you start at Marathon itself, and which is a village, for those listeners who aren't aware, it's a village on the north coast of Attica, with Athens, certainly ancient Athens, being on the sort of towards the south coast of Attica. And 25 miles away. And when you start, the race is normally, it's called the Athens Classic Marathon, and it begins just to the north of the battlefield. And the race is held in October, late October, early November. And both times I've done it, the weather's been horrible. Rain, wind, pretty miserable, not quite how you imagine Greece. But you run around the battlefield, and it's quite nice actually, because it is very nice. And then you run uphill towards Athens. Most of the race is uphill.
Brutal. Yeah. You're running in the steps of Pheidippides. I think the 2004 Olympics was held in Athens, and the marathon was the last event. And it was that same, I remember watching it, on TV, and it was a brutal uphill slog. And then I think you cruise down into Athens at the end. Yeah,
you arrive into the Pan-Athenaic Stadium, I think it is, the stadium from 1896.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I've never done it. I've never done it. So it's on my bucket list for sure.
There are direct flights to Athens from America now.
I'm in.
Well, I would
I
like
think
to
it's
do it
nice.
again because I've only done it. I've done it twice. I've got to do it 3
Yeah.
times. So perhaps, Duncan,
Yeah.
we do it together.
We'll do it
Right.
together. Aspects of history,
Indeed.
We'll do a
Indeed.
park run with aspects of history run.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Pheidippides, there is this race, isn't there? The Spartathon.
The Spartathon. Yeah. Yeah. That's a relatively newer. And I think it was started by British guys. And it's covering that Herodotus narrative, right? From where he says that Pheidippides went before the battle and was asking for the Spartan help.
It's
Yeah,
Athens
like
to Sparta, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like 150 miles, I think.
I looked into doing it. Well, I think you have to have completed at least one ultra inside a certain time.
And I think that's a good idea for them to have that, right? It sounds grueling to me. I've never done it. Would love to do it though. Maybe after you and I do the Athens marathon,
Yeah. Maybe the next day or something. Yeah. Right. So you've mentioned the Incans.
Yeah.
And I know nothing about this. So please enlighten me.
Fascinating. And I didn't until, I just am fascinated with history. I mean, that's the thing that brought me to this wonderful podcast. I absolutely love this podcast. I listened to every episode. Chazqui, they were Incan runners, and they were younger males that were trained just to run. And so the Incan Empire stretched for thousands of miles, and they had an amazing road network, and a bunch of rope bridges, and it was their form of communications. And so these Chazqui, they weren't just trained to run. They weren't just the fittest, because they were fit and they were chosen to be fit. They were also translators. So they carried 2 things. They called it a quipi, which was like a knotted string, and it was colored it was like a code, and it stood for various things. Tell the person this and the governor of this, we need to tax this people, and they would run. And there was a relay station split between, each person would run around a 10-mile stretch, and they'd cover 10 times whatever that is. It's just an amazing amount in a day, because they would be running very fast. And they had these tombos, which were these relay stations. So the Chazqui he would be carrying the quipi, and then he had a patutu, which was a conch shell, and he would be running, and he'd have to know, like, here, you're carrying these knotted strings, here's your translation of this. He would, show up, blow the horn like a mile out, and then that would get the other Chazqui ready to go. And then he would hand off the quipi and say, here's the translation of this, here's the message, double checking, and then he would go and rest and be ready, for the next day's running. So that's how the Incan Empire stayed in contact. And it's fascinating. These guys were chosen when they were young, and they were exempt from doing manual labor. So this was their thing. And it was an honor, and it was a big deal to do.
So if you showed a talent in running, then you were exempted from
one.
And is this something that is continued? Because it's you mentioned this, and then obviously there were the Mexican Native Americans that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Is this something that, there's this brilliant map I saw somewhere recently, and I'll stick it on the show notes, where you look at the top 20 times for, I think it's either a 10K or a marathon in a map. And it's in this one area stretching from Ethiopia to Kenya. Yeah. All these runners, top 20 in the world, and they're all from this sort of same.
Yeah, Great Rift Valley for Kenya. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. Is this something that, obviously it's a natural talent in the Americas, but is it continued today? I mean, is there any kind of legacy of running?
I think there is a legacy of running. The one thing that's fascinating about the Kenyans and Ethiopians, because they as you were saying, they absolutely dominate the sport. They are, well, I'll just speak for the Great Rift Valley. For the Kenyans, they're born at altitude, so they're already got their altitude training as a kid. And from talking to people and talking, I've interviewed a ton of Kenyan runners. Their lifestyle is running. So they as kids, they're running all the time. There's a whole athletics culture and running culture within their community. So they're running all the time, and they're at altitude, and there's no sedentary lifestyle there. They're out, they're running. So yeah, and I think there is that continuation of that around, runners of certain areas having certain abilities. Do I think that Kenyans will, all the world records right now are held by Kenyans, both the male and female. I think it's going to stay that way for a long time. And I do think there's natural abilities there. And there have been, runners from other areas that can hold that pace. I just think that our lifestyle in the West is just not fit for purpose. And I think that's what's kind of holding a lot of other countries back, is this sedentary lifestyle and diet. Is
so how important is diet then?
I think you are what you eat. It's not a cliche. And I know the Ethiopians eat injera.
What's that?
I think it's a rice-based pancake that you fill with vegetables, and it's delicious, and it's just carb loading, right? So there's the whole carb concept of carb loading. What you put in and fuel yourself is going to be super important, and then there's obviously the hydration part. I think it plays a huge component if you're training for a race, but you just have to eat the right food. If you put junk in, you're not going to be able to perform.
I love I'm obsessed with potatoes. So carb loading works for me.
Yeah. Yes. I like potato chips and fortune crisps.
Yes. I don't think they count, do they?
No, I wish they did.
Yeah.
I also love pasta. Too much pasta could be a bad thing.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I can't remember what when I ran my marathon in Athens, because I've only ever done this in Athens. And how many marathons have you run?
I've run 15.
Bloody hell. Right. Well, yeah. I'm banging on about it like I'm the expert, but I remember the night before my first one, I went to a Greek restaurant where I wanted to go to get a nice early night, because you have to be up at 5 a.m. or whatever, which I'm sure you know about. And he applied me with ouzo and raki.
Oh boy. Okay.
Is that what's your view on that for preparation?
No. No. Do not get drunk the night before a marathon. Get drunk after. Celebrate. Be careful, actually. If I'm dead serious now. If you do run a marathon and your body is so depleted at the end, I will tell you this. I don't drink anymore, but when I did drink, I ran the Vermont City Marathon. I lived in Vermont at the time, and the last mile there was an unofficial water station, and they handed out beer. It was like super on the down low, and like they would have gotten in big trouble. And I took it and I drank it. It destroyed me. Like I walked the last part of it because it just went right to my head and I didn't feel good. So yeah, drink like a couple days, celebrate your marathon a couple days after if you're hydrated, rehydrated again.
Oh, right. So beer, I would have thought would be filled with electrolytes and good things like that.
The beer companies would like you to it's only a matter of time, right? Like, they've gotten the hard seltzers and they're cracking all these codes. So I'm pretty soon, maybe we'll see that the Gatorade of beer.
We'll get back on topic. So World War One, I think,
World War
something
One
you wanted to talk about.
Where I wanted to go on this was the concept of the trench runner. So one of the themes that I love to think about is that, running fits into so many places. But, there were the trench runners in World War One, and, there's Gallipoli, messenger. Both sides had these dispatch runners, and they would, they'd be given messages from higher command. If lines were cut. If you saw the movie 1917, great movie, Sam Mendes, one shot, amazing movie. They're not running, right? But they're runners or they're dispatch messengers. So, and I have a personal connection with dispatch runners, and that is my great uncle. His name is Craddock Bagshaw. A lot of my family immigrated over from Ireland and Wales to Washington in the early 1800s, the state of Washington, not Washington D.C. And Craddock was, from that family. He and his brother Enoch Bagshaw. If you Google him, he was a famous University of Washington football coach. But Craddock was his brother, and he was a private, and he was at the Battle of Amiens, and was injured on 11 August 1918. One thing I'm just was fascinated by is I can't get, my sister's really been helping me try to learn about him, other than a grave marker and a picture of him and a couple index cards that are like worn and, shredded from official records of World War One. I don't know too much about him other than he was a dispatch runner and he died in 1920. And from what I've read, he died from lingering effects of the war. So I'm kind of putting two and two together, and I'm thinking that maybe he was gassed, suffered from poison gas. the battle. And we all know what happened in 1919, right? The Spanish flu came and killed more people than World War I. So I'm just wondering if that got him. One thing that if I may, Ollie, can I read a poem?
Of course.
A short one. I love war poetry. I've been, Keith Douglas, World War II, Sassoon, Graves, Rosenberg, World War I, Owen, World War I. There's an American, I found out about this in my research of Craddock. There's an American, you don't hear a lot about American World War I poets because the US got in late. But there was a guy named John Allen Wyeth who was at the Battle of Amiens. He wasn't in the 161st Infantry, the National Guard in Washington. He was in a different unit, but was at that battle that Craddock was there. And he wrote I never had heard of him, but he's a pretty famous guy at the time. But he wrote a series of sonnets and called Chipilly Ridge. And he has one particular sonnet that's called Through the Valley. And it gives me chills because I'll read it and then, reflect on it. But he was a trench runner. He was a dispatch. He ran and they paired you up. So he ran with somebody and he wrote Through the Valley about his experience. So I'll read it. All right, Tom. Yep, I got it fixed. Let's start. A slipping, crumbly path through scratching brush down to the river road. Along the shore, a clanging leap of fire behind black trees and a streak of shrillness slit the sky apart. A sand road, horses, guns in the cloudy rush, and men, teeth clenched on tubes, who lashed and tore through silence. Black, still slopes, a distant sneeze. Hear that? I tell you, my eyes are beginning to smart. A vague black gulch ahead, and the secret hush of evil creeping through the dark. We passed 2 soldiers, pain white, and a man they bore between, blind, twisting head and drunken knees, like Christ. Come on, bud, there you go. You've just been gassed. I reflect on that, and it's a powerful, powerful poem. I think about gassing, and I think about the clenching. I read the clenching of the tubes. I think I was in the military. I was in the Army infantry officer for 5 years and have worn a gas mask. And I think when he says clenching of the tubes, I think he was talking about, the tube on your gas mask, maybe, the drinking tube that they had. And I'm just wondering, like, this is where I'll go with this, is like they find this guy that's, blind, twisting head and drunken knees, like Christ. Come on, bud, there you've been gassed. I'm like, maybe that was my great uncle. It kind of closes the whole circle, and it really it's just such an evocative poem. And I really it makes me kind of want to do a lot more research on my great uncle. And, when I have some time and I can be retired, I'll do that maybe.
Particularly injuries from chemical warfare during the First World War must be something that is, I guess, difficult to... It's internal, I suppose.
Yeah.
It always reminds me, there's the Wilfred Owen line in Dulce Decorum Est, the ecstasy of fumbling when they're trying to get the gas mask on.
You only have so much time. The other thing I was thinking of that's evocative is the John Singer Sargent painting. I don't know if you've seen it, but
yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like I think it's the moon or the sun. It's like an early morning haze and a mist, and there's a whole bunch of soldiers, and it's the blind leading the blind, and they've all been gassed, and they've got bandages over their head. I've seen it in person. I think it is in Washington, D.C., at the National Gallery.
I've seen it in the National as well. So they must have loaned it, or there must be more than one.
Maybe it was on loan. And, I've been to so many art galleries. I can't remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, where it's at, but it is a huge painting. And I love John Singer Sargent. So really well done.
I'll put a link into the show notes for listeners if they want to check that out. I just come back from Vimy Ridge in northern France, where the Canadians have a huge memorial. Yeah. And I was taken down into the tunnels underneath, where they had runners there as well, runners going from the tunnels up into the trenches and down again. But they all wore patches on their arms to signify the fact that they were runners, which of course made them targets for the enemy.
You hear these stories about other wars, like I think in Vietnam, like the officers would take their, shiny, or you don't want to stand out when you're having to carry a message. They didn't run like a marathon. They didn't run like miles and miles and miles. It was the zigzagging of the trench. So I think a lot of this was like, if you've ever run in the forest, probably a lot of bounding, a lot of get out of my way, a lot of pissed off people, drunk people in the trench. There's these obstacles, and then you have to worry about getting shot. And The one thing I forgot to say about the John Allen Wythe sonnet was he and his buddy were given a message to deliver to 2 battalions, but they didn't know where they were. And it was a sealed message. So I don't know, it goes back to 1917. It's like, you got to deliver this message. And Gallipoli too, right? Same kind of theme. Get there before it's too late. So, there was reality into something.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
I can't wait. I love you and Tim. I love your film reviews.
Oh, you're so kind. I'll let Tim know. He'll be delighted.
I love Tim. A lot of your film reviews have made me go back and watch them, because I was not a big fan of Lincoln when I watched it the first time. I thought it was kind of sappy, but you guys, I listened to it, I rewatched it. I'm like, all right, this is a pretty good movie.
Yeah, so it's a wordy movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bunch of men talking. And I heard Oppenheimer is a bunch of men talking and an explosion.
Yeah, we're going to be watching it in 70mm. I don't know what that means. Tim does.
I don't know what it means either.
Right. So now I've raised a few of these things, dear listeners, for Duncan to talk about. And one of the things I've always been interested in, the 4-minute mile, which I think was a historic moment in the story of running.
Definitely.
Why?
Why?
I mean, obviously I get that it broke a barrier, but it doesn't seem that, lots of people have done it. Is it that difficult? Was it that difficult? Why was it difficult?
Yeah. So, hyperbole, I avoid like the most amazing, the biggest, the greatest. A lot of that, we live in this, literally, we say the word awesome all the time. Like, really, does it bring awe? But this is a big one. Roger Bannister, 1954. He was 25 years old at the time. I mean, that's, you're in your mid-20s, right? That's good. But he ran it. The thing that I love about the story is that it was 6 May 1954. He did it in Oxford, in front of 3,000 spectators. And he wasn't like this guy that he was an amateur. He wasn't a guy that spent hours and hours and hours and days and days and days and had, a lot of our athletes these days, not a lot, all of them, the US has these crazy training camps where you're, sitting in an eggshell and you have music piped in and you're given these special things. Hopefully, not, I know we'll get illegal substances, but you do all this crazy stuff to run, to win, to get the medal. Bannister was not like that. I don't believe he ran like competitively until he was 17. The other thing that's cool about this race was that couple cool things. The planets aligned, right? Because I think there were 25-mile-an-hour winds right before the event, and they died down. He was paced, so that was helpful. The other thing that's cool is just little factoid is Abrams from Chariots of Fire fame. He was the announcer live on BBC. So there's that connection to Chariots of Fire with it. Harold Abrams. And what's the big deal about it? Nobody had done it before. To me, it's like, it's there, right? It's like a moon landing. It's a round number, 4 minutes. 4 minutes is 15 miles an hour. So if you get in a car, just get in a car and just go 15, and imagine doing that for 4 minutes. 15 miles an hour doesn't sound that fast.
I don't think I could sprint at that speed.
I've gotten in the 4s, when I was in my prime. I think it's 4:39 is mine, but I can't imagine another 39 seconds. I can't. It's death. Like the mile, if you've never run a mile on a track, it is a sprint, and the 800s that way too. And you got 4 laps. 4 laps. That's a lot of sprinting. The record was set by Moroccan El Garouj in 1999. It hasn't been broken since. So it's still out there. Still a challenge for people. 3:43. That's his record. So maybe there'll be that, who's going to break the 3:40 number. And we got the same thing for the marathon, right? I think.
Who's going to break the 2 hours?
Yeah, Kipchoge did it, right? So I don't know if listeners are aware, but it's a sub 2 hour marathon, right? Does anybody run a sub 2 hour marathon? Kipchoge did it, but he did it like in Vienna, I think, last year, like in a completely controlled environment with pacers. And it wasn't a certified course, so it's a big asterisk mark. I think, again, I think it's only a matter of time. And it's that great number to try to beat. Do
you think it'll go then, the 2 hours?
I think it'll go. I think it's only a matter of time. The one thing that's interesting is a lot of these, or I've seen on some marathons, they have the run at the Eliud Kipchoge pace. And you just see these people like falling over, it's like a padded thing, but you see how fast the pace that he's running, low 4-minute miles, stringing those together. Unbelievable.
Well, another incredible achievement, which didn't last long, was in the 1988 100 meters men's final of the Olympics in Seoul, which is now been called the dirtiest race in history.
Yep.
Where I think eight of the athletes, of the eight, seven have either subsequently were found to have taken performance enhancing drugs or had question marks over them. The aspects of history, lawyers will ask me to say that.
So we've gone from the wonderful, amazing Roger Bannister, and Eliud Kipchoge to the dirtiest race, in history. I remember dating myself here, but I was a teenager and I watched this, and I was into running then, and I was like, oh my God, because I think four of the eight went under 10. So, it was just incredible. Even if you watch it now, it's an amazing race. I mean, Johnson's just got that other gear. He gets like 9.79, I think, but he's a fall guy. This is Duncan, lawyer, whatever. This is Duncan's personal opinion. And I'm not a big Carl. I hope, if Carl Lewis is a listener to the aspects of history, I'm in trouble. Please, Carl Lewis, if you are listening, don't take this out on aspects of history. I'm not a big Carl Lewis fan.
I don't understand that. So you're American. He's won more gold medals on the track than.
Yeah. And he long jumper. Why am I not? I think he was dirty. He actually admitted it, I think in 2003, that he took performance enhancing drugs. And this is super controversial, right? But I think there was a cover up. 1988, I don't know if you remember the 84 Olympics, Cold War, US, or West versus East, Iron Curtain, Soviets, 1980 boycott for the US. Carl Lewis was that smiling guy that just was like, could do it all. An amazing athlete. I just feel like there's an asterisk next to him. I'm not saying I don't respect him or anything. Amazing athlete, amazing runner, amazing, well-rounded person. I just think that he probably got caught up in, it's like baseball here in the US. Just everybody, during the steroid era, like everybody was doing it. So do you put an asterisk next to that because everybody was doing it? Like 7 out of the 8 people, as you said, in 88 in the final were dirty, and it probably really belongs to, I think it was Calvin Smith. I think he got bronze, and he said, like, I deserve the gold, not Lewis.
He was the only one who hadn't been found to have taken any kind of no question mark
from your area. Linford Christie.
Well, he claimed it was tea.
Yeah,
he was found that was in 1988. He claimed it was tea.
British tea is amazing, but I don't know.
I think it might have been Korean tea.
Okay.
I don't think he brought a PG Tips with him, but he then 4 years later won the Olympic gold in Barcelona.
That era, I just think I'm going to come across as jaded. I just don't. Sometimes I think, is the science ahead of the catching it, right? Like,
well, it's a bit like the sort of the Tour de France is about a sort of 15-year period where you just don't. Well, it's likely there was a lot of drug taking.
I look at Lance Armstrong, right? I mean, I don't want to equate Carl Lewis, Lance Armstrong, but they're, I don't know, all American, smiling, yay, USA, like dirty, But yeah, it goes back to everybody's doing it, right? I just think there needs to be asterisks next to things. But I do worry, I have no proof of this. I just worry that, some of the science, like, what is in the best interest is the performance enhancing drug versus catching the performance enhancing drug on the athlete. And Russia's just horrible. Icarus, if you haven't seen that documentary, it's fantastic about doping in cycling. So
you've written a couple of books. I think I'm going to put the links in. I mentioned them at the start. But are there any other books you would recommend for anyone interested in running out there?
There are, and I'm going to go with some weird ones. I mean, other than Born to Run's a great book, a bestseller. This is a weird one. I love like novels. There's a book called Once a Runner, which is a cult classic. It's by John L. Parker. And this is about a guy who's in college and he's trying to run under the 4-minute mile. And it's not crazy like Holden Caulfield level, J.D. Salinger, weird stuff, but it's got that vibe of like kind of a guy and his pursuit, and he's going through the world and his observations. And, I really liked it. It really resonated me when I was really a serious runner, because it talks about just the feelings of having to do these grueling workouts. So I think it's a good telling of what it's like to be a runner, and even a competitive runner, what you have to go through. So that's kind of like the novel, the fiction stuff. If you break it out into the other part of it is like the how-to, like what's a good how-to book? Obviously promoting myself, but I wrote the 30-minute runner, which is for beginners. So just doing 30 minutes a day, very basic. And then I did Run Simple, which is getting rid of your electronics and running free and running without watches, smart watches and graphs and charts and overanalyzing your stuff. But back to the how-to, I'm a big Lydiard fan. So Lydiard was a coach in New Zealand who Peter Snell was an 800-meter runner, gold medalist. He had Snell running 20 miles a day. He was big on concept of, building that cardiovascular base. Lydiard's got a book called Running with Lydiard, and he's also got Running to the Top, which are wonderful books if you're training for anything. He has a concept called periodization, which is getting, and this is what everybody does now. It's like you have phases of your year, like this is your year where you're off. And when you're off, you're taking it easy. You're not training, calm, easy. Then you get into the, base building where you're running, you're building up your cardiovascular and your musculoskeletal base. And then there's the speed and you layer on that and then you peak. It can be used for anybody, it can be used for, if you're running your first 5K, trying to find yourself, get your body into that peak shape. And then there's a weird, big, huge, it's the Bible of running. It's called The Lore of Running by Timothy Noakes. Everything you want to know about running. So it's got how-tos, it's got the history. It has a lot of science in there. It's a big, dense read. It's a consultative guide for me.
Great stuff. I'll put links in there. This has been a great chat.
Wonderful chat. Thank you. I get super honored.
Thanks so much for listening. As I mentioned at the start, plenty of great content to come with General Petraeus and Lord Roberts this Saturday. Until then, thank you and good night.